London is the capital and largest city of both England and the United Kingdom. Its wider metropolitan area is the largest in Western Europe, with a population of 14.9 million. As one of the world's major global cities, London exerts a strong influence on world art, entertainment, fashion, commerce, finance, education, healthcare, media, science, technology, tourism, transport, and communications. London stands on the River Thames in southeast England, at the head of a 80 kilometers tidal estuary down to the North Sea. The River Thames, known alternatively in parts as the River Isis, is a river that flows through southern England, including London. At 346 kilometers, it is the longest river entirely in England and the second longest in the United Kingdom after the River Severn. The river rises at Thames Head in Gloucestershire and flows into the North Sea near Tilbury, Essex and Gravesend, Kent, via the Thames estuary. From the west, it flows through Oxford, where it is sometimes called the Isis, Reading, Henley-on-Thames, and Windsor. The Thames also drains the whole of Greater London. The lower reaches of the river are called the Tideway, derived from its long tidal reach up to Teddington Lock. Its tidal section includes most of its London stretch and has a rise and fall of 23 feet, 7 meters. From Oxford to the estuary, the Thames drops by 55 meters, 180 feet. Running through some of the drier parts of mainland Britain and heavily abstracted for drinking water, the Thames discharge is low considering its length and breadth. The Severn has a discharge almost twice as large on average, despite having a smaller drainage basin. In Scotland, the Tay achieves more than double the Thames average discharge from a drainage basin that is 60% smaller. Along its course are 45 navigation locks with accompanying weirs. Its catchment area covers a large part of southeastern and a small part of western England. The river is fed by at least 50 named tributaries. The river contains over 80 islands. With its waters varying from freshwater to almost seawater, the Thames supports a variety of wildlife and has a number of adjoining sites of special scientific interest, with the largest being in the North Kent marshes and covering 20.4 sq mi. However, this massive water power creates a problem for settlements, floods, and tides. Flooding in London has been a problem since Roman times. Today, the method used to prevent these problems is the Thames Barrier. The Thames Barrier is a retractable barrier system built to protect the floodplain of most of Greater London from exceptionally high tides and storm surges moving up from the North Sea. It has been operational since 1982. When needed, it is closed during high tide. At low tide, it can be opened to restore the river's flow towards the sea. Built about 3.2 kilometers east of the Isle of Dogs. Its northern bank is in Silvertown in the London Borough of Newham, and its southern bank is in the New Charlton area of the Royal Borough of Greenwich. In 1954, the Waverley Committee, established to investigate the serious North Sea flood of 1953, which affected parts of the Thames estuary and parts of London, recommended that, as an alternative to raising the banks, the possibility and cost of erecting a structure across the Thames which could be closed in a surge should be urgently investigated. In 1966, Sir Herman Bondi was asked to take an independent view of the situation. He considered the estimated construction costs and the probability of a flood and of damage if the barrier was not built. He strongly recommended that a barrier should be built in order to avoid the catastrophe of flooding central London, and a site was agreed at Woolwich. The barrier protects central London against a storm surge, caused when a deep depression forms to the north of Scotland and progresses across the North Sea and southeasterly towards southern Scandinavia. When such a surge coincides with a high spring tide, the high winds associated with the depression can funnel the water up the Thames estuary and cause surges of up to 3.5 meters. The planners assessed that in the absence of a barrier, such a surge could inundate 45 square miles, 117 square kilometers of land, put hospitals, power stations, and the London Underground out of action, and cause damage estimated in 1966 at £2 billion, about £50 billion at 2020 prices. The barrier was designed to provide a flood defense capable of resisting a once-in-1,000-year surge tide at a base date of 2030. The concept of the rising sector gates was devised by Reginald Charles Draper. In 1969, from his parents' house in Pellet Grove, Wood Green, London, he constructed a working model. The novel rotating cylinders were based on the design of the taps on his gas cooker. The barrier was designed by Rendell, Palmer, and Tritton for the Greater London Council, and the concept tested at the Hydraulics Research Station, Wallingford. The site at New Charlton was chosen because of the relative straightness of the banks and because the underlying river chalk was strong enough to support the barrier. Work began at the barrier site in 1974 and progressed in 2 phases, and first trial operation of all the gates together was carried out on 31 October 1982. The barrier was officially opened on May 8, 1984, by Queen Elizabeth II. Built across a 520-meter wide stretch of the river, the barrier divides the river into 4 61-meter 200 feet and 2 approximately 30-meter 100 feet navigable spans. There are also 4 smaller, non-navigable channels between 9 concrete piers and 2 abutments. The floodgates across the openings are circular segments in cross-section, and they operate by rotating, raised to allow underspill, to allow operators to control upstream levels, and a complete 180-degree rotation for maintenance. All the gates are hollow and made of steel up to 40 millimeters thick. The gates are filled with water when submerged and empty as they emerge from the river. The 4 large central gates are 20.1 meters, 66 feet high, and weigh 3,700 tons each. 13 4-radial gates by the river banks, also about 30 meters, 100 feet wide, can be lowered. These gate openings, unlike the main 6, are non-navigable. As of May 2024, there have been 221 flood defense closures. The barrier was closed twice on November 9, 2007, after a storm surge in the North Sea, which was compared to the 1-in-1953. The main danger of flooding from the surge was on the coast above the Thames barrier, where evacuations took place, but the winds abated a little, and at the Thames barrier, the November 9, 2007 storm surge did not completely coincide with high tide. On August 20, 1989, hours after the Martianist disaster, the barrier was closed against a spring tide for 16 hours to assist the diving and salvage operations. The barrier has survived 15 boat collisions without serious damage. On October 27, 1997, the barrier was damaged when the dredger MV Sandkite hit one of the piers in thick fog. As the ship started to sink, she dumped her 3,300-ton load of aggregate, finally sinking by the bow on top of one of the barrier's gates, where she lay for several days. Initially, the gate could not be closed as it was covered in a thick layer of gravel. A longer-term problem was the premature loss of paint on the flat side of the gate, caused by abrasion. The barrier was originally designed to protect London against a very high flood level, with an estimated return period of 100 years up to the year 2030, after which the protection would decrease, while remaining within acceptable limits, t the time of its construction. The barrier was expected to be used 2 to 3 times per year. By the mid-2000s, it was being operated 6 to 7 times a year. In the 2010s, the barrier was generally closed twice a year, but the average is still 6-7, due to the extreme of 50 times in 2013-14. This defense level allowed for long-term changes in sea and land levels as understood at that time. From 1982 until March 19, 2007, The barrier was raised 100 times to prevent flooding. It is also raised monthly for testing, with a full test closure over high tide once a year. In a January 2013 letter to The Times, a former member of the Thames Barrier Project Management Team, Dr. Richard Bloor, stated that it was not designed with increased storminess and sea level rises in mind, and called for a new barrier to be looked into immediately. The Environment Agency responded that it did not plan to replace the Thames Barrier before 2070, as it was designed with an allowance for sea level rise of 8 millimeters per year, which has not happened in the intervening years. At the time, the barrier was around halfway through its designed lifespan. The standard of protection it provides will gradually decline over time after 2030, from a 1 in 1,000 year event. The Environment Agency was examining the Thames Barrier for its potential design life under climate change, with early indications being that subject to appropriate modification, the Thames Barrier would be capable of providing continued protection to London against rising sea levels. A UK Environment Agency review in 2023 said that new climate models showed heightened risk of flooding, implying a need for raised defenses upstream of the Thames Barrier by 2050, but that the Thames Barrier was expected to continue to operate until 2070, a decision on the best option for adapting to sea level rise to 2100 will be taken by 2040.S of 2024. Concerns exist that climate change is occurring faster than previously expected,